strength supporting me through it. This had been the mainstay of my belief all these 6 years. And I truly didn't doubt it. And it won't come as a surprise to anyone here to know it didn't happen. And I was quite shocked by the fact that although I still believed as strongly as ever, my faith couldn't even begin to touch the grief. Just didn't come anywhere close. And that really shocked me because I had fully, totally believed it would. As I say, that wasn't the end. I remained a Christian. I sort of wobbled for a little while, but I remained a Christian, got back into it. But there was just that sense of, oh, you let me down there, pal. You know, you didn't keep your side of the bargain there. So there was just that note of doubt. Just that note of, just was registered. Later that year, in the autumn of that year, I moved up to the Highlands of Scotland. I don't know whether any of you have ever encountered religion in the Highlands of Scotland. It's a very different picture from religion in Tunbridge Wells, I can tell you. I was so shocked. It was like encountering a different religion altogether. I went up there, I tried to find a church. It was the first thing I wanted to do. And first of all, I went to a sort of meeting of the brethren, and I kind of assumed that South of England rules would apply, so I trotted in there in my jeans. This did not go down well. The glares, the looks. When you're in the Highlands, and in one of these one of the Presbyterian churches, women wear skirts to church and hats. And underneath the hats, they're wearing their long hair up in a bun. And there are churches, actually, the further west you go, the more fierce it becomes. And on the west coast, where luckily I'm not, but on the west coast, and then as you go out to the islands and the Hebrides, this is not an exaggeration. If a woman turns up to go to church, to some of the churches, not all the churches, but if you go to either the Free Church of Scotland or the Free Presbyterian Church of Scotland, I've made this joke before, but when a church puts free in its name, it's a bit like a country putting democratic in its name. There are churches there that if you turn up in trousers as a woman, you will not be allowed in. They are fierce, they are scary, they are dour, they are grim, they are biblical literalists, they believe it all word for word. Hell, forget that being a metaphor, that is a reality. I was actually taken and shown, soon after I went up there, a children's playground. This was a Sunday, and they had chained the children's swings just in case a child enjoyed themselves on the Sabbath and offended the Lord. Unbelievable. Another story I might have told before, but I just think it's worth retelling. So, again, it's just one of those things you can't really get your head around. I had a friend stay, we were going on a bit of a tour around the Highlands, and I'd taken her across to Ullapool, which is an absolutely gorgeous, gorgeous place on the west coast of Scotland, just perfect. We were staying in a B&B there, and when we were having breakfast on the Sunday morning, we heard the sound of a helicopter coming in to land. And we asked the landlady what it would be. And she said, oh, that'll be the Stornoway Coast Guard. Stornoway is the main town on the Outer Hebrides, which the island is about 40 miles to the west of the mainland. That'll be the Stornoway Coast Guard coming across with his Sunday newspaper. You cannot buy a Sunday newspaper on a Sunday in the Outer Hebrides. It's the Sabbath. At that time, there were no ferries between the mainland and the Outer Hebrides on the Sabbath. Even now, there are some, but they're still fiercely resisted by certain people out there. I've been out there. The Outer Hebrides are beautiful and gorgeous and well worth a visit. But if you're there on a Sunday, make sure you've stocked up on anything you're going to need, because the only things that are open are churches. And the Coast Guard had to fly the helicopter from Stornoway, 40 miles from the mainland, to buy a Sunday newspaper. Okay. Welcome to religion in the Highlands. I had been up there for 3 months and attended different church services because I was desperately looking for a church that wasn't mad. And it was 3 months before I found a church whose sermon was based on a New Testament text and not an Old Testament text. I got a job up there, and the chap I was working for came into the office one day, white as a sheet, and immediately poured himself a large scotch, and I was amazed because I've never seen him drink before at all. He'd just been to a funeral, a Free Church of Scotland funeral of a non-believer. And the preacher at the funeral had announced to the dead person's nearest and dearest that he was now shrieking in agony in hell because he hadn't been a believer. Yep. This is Highland religion. I also ended up, this is another story, but I'm not going to go into it. I ended up sharing a house with someone, it was just a house share, and I ended up doing it with someone who had been a minister in the Free Church of Scotland. That was weird. He had actually had to leave the ministry because it's so dour and so unforgiving and so actually quite nasty. I mean, it's so judgmental and rigid and unbending and totally lacking in empathy. And he had been a minister in this church, but actually underneath it all was trying to be a nice guy, and so it just hadn't worked for him. And it had reached the stage where he'd had a nervous breakdown. He just couldn't take it anymore because his seniors in the church were trying to force him to take a hard line with parishioners who were sinful, and trying to force him to denounce them and refuse to have anything to do with them, and it just wasn't in his nature to do that. And so he'd come under this enormous strain and had had a nervous breakdown, whereupon, fulfilling their duty to look after their clergy, the Free Church appointed 3 ministers, to come and pay him a visit, during which they told him that he should be praying very, very hard for forgiveness, because clearly he had deeply offended God, or God wouldn't have punished him by sending his nervous breakdown. I'm kind of painting this guy as a goodie. I mean, a lot of the attitudes had remained, and for instance, I've just touched on the strict Sabbatarianism up in the Highlands. I was never into all that, and I was quite happy to do washing and hang it out in the garden on a Sunday. He didn't like that. That used to cause a few scenes. He couldn't bear it. He didn't mind if I did the washing and just put it on an area in the kitchen where the neighbours couldn't see it. That was okay. Put it out in the garden, that wasn't. And of course, you're going to get that when you've got a very fierce, rigid, very judgmental church. You are going to get people just doing what it takes to avoid being denounced by other people, rather than really caring about whether something's genuinely right or wrong or not, or makes any sense. And of course, I was absolutely, totally convinced that they'd got Christianity wrong, because I'd met God, and I knew he was a nice chap, and they were making him out to be some kind of ogre. And I knew they were wrong, and they knew I was. So, we had a real ongoing situation of that's not my Christianity you're talking about. And finally I found a church that did work for me, and it was the cathedral in Inverness, which was part of the Scottish Episcopalian Church, which is basically the Church of England in Scotland. And it was very high church, lots of formal liturgy, beautiful music. I mean, this was part of the appeal. They had a superb organist and a very, very good choir. And they had all the bells and smells and things, which as a Methodist I wasn't used to, but I did quite like. You did get this sense of awe and wonder and stuff. And I kind of got used to it, and I liked it, and it was a nice liberal preaching. You actually found that they were preaching a loving God again, which made a very welcome change. But ironically, it was in that cathedral that my road from Damascus experience occurred. Because there I was, I'd been going there for nearly 2 years, and there I was on this particular Sunday morning, and as I had done every Sunday morning for the last nearly 2 years, I was singing. It was all sung creed and stuff, sung services, so I was singing my way through the creed, as I'd done many times before. I believe in God, the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, and of all things visible and invisible. And then it went on, and in Jesus Christ, his only Son, our Lord, who was conceived by the Holy Ghost, born of the Virgin Mary, suffered under Pontius Pilate, was crucified, dead and buried. He descended into hell. That was the line that got me. Looking back now, I think it's slightly ironic that I hadn't stumbled over maker of heaven and earth, born of the Virgin Mary, crucified, dead, but never mind. It was the descended into hell that got me. I had said it, I'd sung it. It must have been about 90 times before. But I'd never noticed it. I'd never noticed it. Just sung it. And for some reason, on that particular Sunday, it leapt out at me as if it was on stalks and kind of thumped me in the eye. He descended into... Of course he didn't descend into hell. There isn't a hell. I don't believe that. And I was deeply shocked. Not that there was something in the creed I didn't literally believe. What shocked me was that I'd been saying it, singing it, week after week after week after week for nearly 2 years, and I'd never noticed before that I was claiming to believe something I didn't and never had believed. And I thought, well, hang on a minute. If that slipped through, and I've been saying I believe it, and I really don't, what else has slipped through? What else have I been singing and praying and saying amen to and nodding my head at like a nodding dog in the sermons that I don't actually believe? And so because my religion was really important to me, my faith was really important to me, so this was a troubling thing, this needed to be resolved. So I decided that I was going to spend a few weeks really scrutinising every word that was spoken, sung, written, read or prayed in the church services to see whether I believed those or not. So I did that, and rather to my dismay, I discovered that there was actually an awful lot that I either definitely didn't believe or that was actually completely meaningless. The hymns especially. You start looking at hymns and trying to make them, I think, what on earth? But because they're buried in a nice tune and you're used to the tune and you're singing, you don't notice. So the whole experience just jolted me out of the passive acceptance of it all and into critically analysing everything that was being said and claimed. And that then started me thinking other things as well. And I started looking around, and I mean, at the heart of my belief had been, as I said, this belief that there was a God who loved us, was all good, wanted this relationship with us, who could transform our lives, and we could spend time with this God. Well, hang on a minute, if that's true, and you've got all these people who claim, who think they've been doing that, how come, if I'm absolutely honest about it, it's my non-religious acquaintances who, on the whole, and obviously there are exceptions, but who, on the whole, seemed more generous, more poised, more in control of their lives, less inclined to flap about things and get into a tiz about things and fret about things unnecessarily? How come they were the ones who seemed to be actually enjoying their lives and being generous in their interactions with other people, and they weren't the judgmental ones? And also, surely, if there's a God who wants to transform your life, and there's a Christian who wants God to transform their life, and the two are in contact, wouldn't you expect the Christians to be noticeably calmer, serener, better able to deal with the crisis and all this sort of thing? And as I looked around, I thought, I can't honestly say that that's the case. So that was all kind of feeding into the thought process. And then, because I was in this new analysing frame of mind, I was